Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are new here, I'm Johnny Chivers, and in today's video we're going to do a zero to hero course on AWS Glue. We're going to cover AWS Glue in full using the console. We're going to cover AWS Glue Data Catalog, AWS Glue ETL, AWS Dev Endpoints, and AWS Triggers as well by the end of this lesson. Bit of housekeeping first in terms of the AWS console. When filming this course, AWS are in the process of kind of switching a few things around, and you'll notice that it changes partway through the course the way the console looks. When I refer to AWS jobs, I'm actually talking about things contained in the legacy tab at the moment, and I'll put that on screen so you can see. At some point in the near future, AWS are going to merge the legacy and the jobs tab together again, and everything that I talk about will be available under jobs again. So depending at the point in time you find this video, those two things may be separate or they may be one, but hopefully it's easy to work out from there from what I've just shown you. In terms of actual course housekeeping, all the data that I use, I put on my GitHub page where you can go download it. The slides are also available for free, but I've hosted those on Buy Me a Coffee. You just need to enter $0 and you don't need any credit cards or debit cards to sign up, so you can go get those for free. It's just easier for me to host them there rather than my website to keep costs down. In terms of AWS, some basic AWS knowledge would help, but it's not essential, but you will need to have signed up for an AWS account. Of course, AWS Glue does not come under free tier AWS. However, the entire course cost me 60 cents to do. So if you bear that in mind and make sure you switch things off as you don't use them, then you should be roughly in the same ballpark. But that varies region to region and time you have resources up. But it's definitely worth the investment if you want to learn AWS Glue. With that being said, I would also appreciate a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me continue to make these resources for free. And I also put them all on my website, and if you want to go there and check that out, the link is in the description. Now, with all the housekeeping out of the way, let's get into the course. Join me on the computer and we'll do the first slide and start learning about AWS Glue hands-on using the AWS console. So in terms of the course overview, we're going to cover what is AWS Glue, why do we use AWS Glue. Then we're going to do a quick bit of setup work on the AWS console. This will involve setting up an S3 bucket with a couple of folders and then downloading the data from GitHub onto S3. Once we've done that, we'll cover the theory on the Glue Data Catalog. Then we'll look at the Glue Data Catalog on the console. We'll discuss what an AWS database is and create our database. We'll look at the tables and create a table. We'll also discuss partitions and how they operate inside AWS, plus we'll already have a partition on our data. We'll cover AWS Glue Crawlers. We'll look at AWS Glue Connections, and we'll look at AWS Glue Jobs. Once we've got a job up and running, we'll look at the triggers and how triggers work in AWS Glue. And then as a final bonus, we'll look at AWS Glue Dev Endpoints and actually create an endpoint and a Glue script using that endpoint. So what is AWS Glue? AWS Glue is a fully managed ETL service. It consists of a central metadata repository, which is known as the Glue Data Catalog. So that's kind of fundamental to what's going on, and it sits right here in this diagram. As you can see, it's central to everything. It has a Spark ETL engine, which is completely serverless, as it says at the start, and it has a flexible scheduler. So if we look at the diagram over here, you can see that Glue Data Catalog sits in the middle, and it has connections, tables, settings, transformations. And out of the Glue Data Catalog, you can create jobs, or jobs can use information, i.e. metadata, in the Glue Data Catalog to create scripts. And these scripts can be scheduled, and then they move data from point A to point B. And you can access the Glue Data Catalog through the AWS Management Console, which is how we're coming in today to do the majority of this work. But you also have command line as usual. So why do we use AWS Glue? So AWS Glue offers a fully managed serverless ETL tool. This removes the overhead and the barriers to entry when there is a requirement for an ETL service in AWS. So in other words, it's the native AWS ETL service. So if you're looking to move data around AWS in a manner where you don't have to manage the infrastructure, then AWS Glue is the tool for you. Okay, setup work. So we're going to do a bit of setup work. We're going to create an S3 bucket. We're going to create a couple of folders under this. We're going to upload some data, and then we're also going to create an IAM role that we can use with AWS Glue for the remainder of this course. So this is the setup work. So let's log into the AWS console, and I'll see you there. Okay, guys, that's me logged into the AWS console. We want to go to S3. So type in S3 in the search menu and go to S3. Once there, we want to create a new bucket. So I'm just going to create a new bucket for this work. and give the bucket a name. It has to be unique within the entirety of AWS. So I'm just going to call mine after myself, Glue full course, because hopefully no one else has my name. Just accept everything else as default. So just give it a name and we'll accept everything else as default. That's fine. Create the bucket. And once the bucket's created and click into it, you'll end up here. So we need to create a couple of folders while we're here. So click the create folder, and the first one we're going to call is data, and that's where we're going to put our data. So just create that folder. The next folder we're going to create is called temp-directory. And the temp directory is where our temporary files that Glue actually creates and needs to persist will stay. And we will supply this actually as a parameter at runtime. So in other words, this is a directory that Glue is going to use in a temporary location. And create folder, and the last one we'll call is scripts. So this is the location that Glue will actually persist the scripts that we create in it, and we'll supply this again when we're in Glue. Let's go into data, and let's create a new folder, and what we're going to call this is customers_database. And what I'm doing here is giving the folder a physical name that will represent the logical interpretation. So because this is called database, this folder will be where our customer artifacts for the database sit. So let's create that folder. So in other words, this is just going to be our database folder. And under that is we're going to create another folder, and we're just going to call this one customers_CSV. And that is going to be our customers CSV table, and we're going to create that. Then we're going to click in that one more, and we're going to create another folder, and we're going to call this one data load, which is going to be our data load date. So give it the date that you're on currently, and I am on that. So keeping it all integers, and I'm saying that is 2021 of the 12th, 30th. I'm putting it together. So that's year, month, day. So YYY, MM, day. So day. And create that folder. So with the data load folder, and let's open that up now here. Next thing we need is the data. So onto the link below in the description, go to the GitHub. There's a customers.csv file sitting right there. If we just click into it quickly, you'll see that it's a customer CSV file. It's got customer ID, title, first name, middle name, last name, suffix, customer. A lot more data than that as well. If I just go across here, password hashes, phones, emails, everything we need for the purposes of this demo. So back out, and you want to go code, and you want to download as a zip. Double click the zip once it's downloaded and get it open on your main downloads folder. That's ready to go for me. Back onto AWS, upload, and go to add files, and go into the folder, grab the customer CSV and click OK. Then click upload. And as you can see, the customer CSV has landed in the folder. So that's the setup work in terms of S3. The next thing we need to do is create an IAM role. That's a service role that we're going to use throughout for Glue. So go to IAM. I'm just going to open up a new tab here so I have it somewhere else. You can click on the same tab if you want. Go to roles, go to create role, give the role a name. We want an AWS service role. And we're looking for Glue, so it's in alphabetical order, which is G. So click Glue, as you can see, Glue. Next, permissions. Let's be very bad and just give it admin access. Because we're creating buckets and stuff, the default Glue policy won't work out of the box because it is a resource constraint on bucket name. So to keep things simple, I'm just going to use admin access. Bad practice in production, but it's okay for the purposes of learning, and it's easier for all of us following along that we just have all the permissions. Let's leave the tags. We don't need that. And I'm going to call this one Glue Course Full Access. And I'm just going to put delete on the end so I remember to delete the role once I'm done with it. And then let's just check it exists. Glue-course full access. Oops, spelled wrong, but it'll be okay. Delete. Okay, so that's all the setup work complete. Let's just jump on, do a bit more theory, and then we can get hands-on with AWS Glue on the console itself. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is the AWS Data Catalog. And as I said earlier in the video, this sits at the center of everything AWS Glue. And at its heart, and I've actually made this away from the bullet point, it's a persistent meta store. So it's a persistent metadata meta store, and that's really important. That's its fundamental job, is to act as a persistent metadata store. It's a managed service that lets you store, annotate, and share metadata, which can be used to query and transform data. And the big question is, what is metadata? So over on the right-hand side here, I've put some examples. That could be data location, schema, data types, data classification. And when we jump onto the console in just a second, this will be broken down into databases, tables, connections, and even classifiers. So when we jump on the console, you'll see the Glue Data Catalog in action. But at its heart, in theory, it is a persistent metastore of data. There's one per region in AWS account. That's a good question that comes up on the exams a lot. So there's one metastore per region in AWS. You control access to the metastore and the resources that it holds through IAM, and you can use it for data governance. So you can annotate it and say this data is sensitive, or this data is classified, or this data is incomplete. And you can give it descriptions and names and things like that. So let's jump onto the console and let's actually look at where the AWS Glue Data Catalog is. So back on the console, and type in Glue. And once loaded, you can see here on the left-hand side, the Glue Data Catalog. So it's all these things here. It is databases, and within databases, you have tables and connections. It's crawlers, which is inside crawlers, you have classifiers. You have schema registries, which we won't be touching in this course. It's used for streaming data mainly. We won't be touching it. It does come up occasionally, but in terms of learning Glue and Glue 101 and what you really need to fundamentally know about Glue, schema registries comes after that. And then you also have settings, so it's about encrypting metadata and things like that. So Glue Data Catalog, even though we say it's persistent metastore, at its heart, it's databases, tables, connections, crawlers, classifiers, and settings. And inside databases, you start with a default database. So this is just a default one that AWS create for you. So let's jump back into the theory, take a look at what databases and tables are, and then we'll create a database and we'll actually use a crawler to create a table. So we'll do this in a couple of different parts to break up the theory and the practical, but let's jump on to the actual slides for now and cover what a database is. So an AWS database is a set of associated data catalog tables, definitions organized into a logical group. So it's just a name that we give, i.e. a database, which is being represented by this database symbol that we place tables in. So tables belong to a database. And let's not forget fundamentally as well, the data or the tables all reside in their original locations. The AWS Glue Data Catalog is just a metastore of information belonging to that data. It doesn't actually move the data anywhere. It always stays where it is. So a database is just a way of organizing tables into logical groups. You're not actually physically moving the tables anywhere or moving the data anywhere. It's just a naming convention to logically organize those tables. And let's go create a database. So on the console, in database, we want to add a database and we need to give our database a name. So if you remember back onto S3, and I'll just go there quickly on this other tab. So if you remember inside the S3 folder we created, we called it data, and then I created a folder called customer database. All my tables belonging to this database, i.e. the folders below, will be set inside this folder. So all the tables below belonging to this database will be set inside this folder. It's worth bearing in mind that you don't actually have to use a folder for your database. You can just leave that part blank when it asks you, and you can make your tables from anywhere. But I find it easier to keep it logically and physically located the same. So database, and then the next directory down is tables. Back onto the console, we need to give this a name. So it's going to be customers. Customers database. I should also add, always use underscores because Spark needs underscores for its engine. It will convert them for you from hyphens to underscores in certain places, and other places it won't let you enter them on the Glue Data Catalog. But just make sure everything is in small letters and underscores. That's really important. Location, well, we already knew what it was because I copied it in. And description is this is a database of customer information. Okay, and we create, and you can see that our customer database has been created. If I click in, we get a little location here. As I said, it doesn't really mean anything, but it makes more sense to create a folder as your database and then place your tables under that. Okay, now we have the database set up. we're going to take a look at AWS Glue Tables. So as I mentioned before in the video, database is just where we logically group tables. And tables by definition are the metadata definition that represents your data. The data resides in its original store. This is just a representation of the schema. So this is really important. What it's saying is that the data always resides where it has lived, and the Glue Data Catalog is just a representation of that data in schema form. If we quickly jump onto the console and we go to the S3 bucket, it means in the terms of this S3 bucket, when we add this Glue data, when we add this data to the Glue Data Catalog, the data is still in S3. The data doesn't go anywhere. Similarly, if we were to scan a database, for example, and add it to the Glue Data Catalog, the data still resides in the database. We're only bringing the schema information across onto the Glue Data Catalog. The data itself always sits where it lives. Back onto the presentation. If we just look at a couple of concepts we need to understand before we add these tables. So partitions are really important. Partitions are folders where data is stored in S3, which are physical entities, which are mapped to partitions, which are logical entities. So physical entities mapped to logical entities. And what that means, if we just jump back onto the console and take a look at our customer CSV. As I mentioned before, this folder is going to be our database, and inside we'll add another couple of tables before we're done. But right now we have the customer CSV folder, which is going to become a table in the Glue Data Catalog. Underneath, we have partitioned by data load. So this is our physical partition as a folder where we're going to get a data load column, and the value for all the data under this folder will be 20, 21, 12, 30. If we were to carry on and add more data load folders with more data, then our queries, if we added them and told it to look at the data load date, would only look at the data in that specific folder for that query that we specify. What? Okay, example. So straight off the AWS website, if we take a look at what's going on here, you can see that they're using a sales table where they have partitioned or put the data into 3 separate folders below where they have year, month, and day. And the way this works, if we were to write a query and we wanted the data for where the year was 2019, the month was February, and the day was 1, you'd write the query to say where year equals 2019, where month equals February, where day equals 1. The query would come in to the sales table, go into the year 2019, go down into February, and then go down into the day 1 and search these 2 files here. It knows they exclude all this other data sitting there because of the way the partitions are. So partitions are just folders in S3 that then help us query the data more efficiently because the query only goes down into the folders that are specified. Right. One last thing to cover before we create a table, and that's AWS Glue Crawlers. And a crawler is just a wee program that AWS have wrote that actually goes in and looks at all the data on S3 or databases and infers the schemas for us. It's to save us having to manually enter the table schema in the AWS Glue Data Catalog. Now I'm going to show you how you would manually enter the schema right now, but what we're going to do is actually stop that process halfway through and add the table using a crawler. So let's jump onto the AWS Glue console and take a look. Right, back on the console, what we want to do is go databases, customer database, tables and customer database, and now we're in the table section of our customers database, but obviously we don't have any tables. So as I mentioned, if you go onto the left hand side there and click add tables, you have 2 options, or 3 options. You can add tables using a crawler, add a table manually, and then add a table from an existing schema if you have one. I'm going to quickly show you how you can add a table manually using the console. So the first thing you need to do is enter a name, which would be test, and we're going to call this one customer CSV. And you want to select a database, which is the customer's database. You want to hit next. Data stored in S3, and you want to specify the path in the account where the data resides. So that's into the S3 bucket, that's into data, that's into the database, and it's the customers underscore CSV. You want to click next, and you want to select our data is in CSV. Our delimiter is comma, and you hit next. Now you must manually add the data itself. So as I mentioned, we have a partition column. if we jump back in, our partition column is called data load. And what you would manually then do is click this and say data load. And then you need to give it the actual data type, which is small int, and add. Then you need to add the next column. Now, if we just quickly jump back onto Git and you click into the customer CSV file, you get a wee table representation of what's going on. So the next one would be customer ID. Paste it in and then choose it as small letters, or change it to small letters and underscores. And that was a small int, and you add. Then you want to add the next one, and it would be name style. So you would copy and paste name style in. Name style. And if we have a look at it, it's in Boolean data type. So we would go find Boolean, which is here, and you would add. Then you want to add another column, and this time it's title. So you would just take title and change it to small letters. Then it would be string and add. And you get the picture. You would go through every single one of these columns the whole way across and add them in manually. Takes a bit of time. But rather than doing that, AWS have actually added a thing called a crawler. So if we exit out of this and don't save, we come back here. And to add using a crawler, you want to go add tables using crawler. What we want to do then is give the crawler a name. So I'm going to call it crawler underscore customer underscore CSV. And we want to click next. Data stores, crawl all folders. S3, include path. Let's go find that CSV table, which is in databases, customer CSV, select. Then we want to go next, add another data store, no. Use an existing role, which is that Glue service role we created at the start. Make sure you have this. If you haven't, go back to the setup section and follow the steps to get it added. On demand and database, we're going to put this inside the customers database, and we want to click next. And that is perfect. Hit finish. Highlight it and then click run crawler. This will take a couple of minutes to start up, run over the data and find the tables. So I'm just going to pause the video here and we'll pick it up when we're done. Okay, as you can see, that took 48 seconds to run in total and one table was added. So let's take a look at the table itself. So let's go in the long way via databases, customer databases, tables and customer database. And you can see that we've added the table. You can see that it was updated on the 1st of January 2022 at 4:33 a.m. And as you can see, we have the table name based on the folder name in S3. So it's used this folder name to infer the table name. If we click into it, you'll see that very quickly we have some information. So this is the location of where it is, which is here. It has recognized that it's CSV off the bat. It's put it in the customer databases. It's recognized that there are delimiters of comma. It has recognized that it needs to skip the first line, and it's looked across a couple of other things just to check different things like orders of columns, are columns quoted, etc., etc. And then most importantly, it's picked out that data load as the date partition, and then it's inferred all the other names. And as you can see, as I said, it needs it in smalls for the Spark engine, so it's done that, but it hasn't done anything else. It hasn't tried to separate names out. It's just took them as is and made them into smalls, and that's fine for what we're trying to do. Now, let's have a quick look at the data in this table. So one of the things before we go is to actually view the partitions. And if you click onto it, you can see that it's picked up that partition. And again, that's really important. So view partitions, and it's picked up the partition, and that's the first part of the data that we can see. And then the next thing we want to do is actually look at the data. To do that, you would go to AWS Athena. So click in the top and go to Athena. And I'm going to open that in new tab. New Athena console experience, excellent. Let's get out of that there, and let's click on the left hand side and go to query editor. If this is the first time you've been into Athena, you will have to set up a few things. So before you run a query, you need to set up a query results location in S3. If we go back into our bucket and we go up to the full course, I'm going to create a folder here, and I'm just going to call this Athena underscore results and save. And then jump back into Athena. So we're going to use here to save the results. Settings, we want to go manage. We want to browse S3. we want to go to that Glue bucket, full course. We want to click on the Athena results and choose. So that's it there, Athena results, choose and save. Brilliant. Then we want to go back out into the editor, which is here. You want to be on the AWS Glue Data Catalog. You want to be on the customer databases. And then if you just click this little 3-dot menu and click preview table, it'll do a select limit 10, and then it will bring back the data for us. And if we have a little look, you can see that all the data is there and present. Excellent. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is connections, which we'll look at very, very quickly. You can skip that section if you're not interested in it. And then we're going to look at actually creating AWS Glue jobs and doing some ETL on this data. Okay, next we're just going to quickly look at AWS Glue Connections. They are part of the Glue ecosystem. They are useful, but they're not really critical to getting started, but good to know information for future developments. So it's just a catalog object that contains the properties that are required to connect to a particular data store. In other words, it's connection strings with usernames and passwords saved, so you can just reference the connection object rather than having to write out the big long string. So if we just quickly jump onto the catalog and we go to connections, and then once on connections, if you just go add connection, you give it a name. You can choose your database type depending on what you're doing. So there's JDBC, RDS, Redshift, document. Click Redshift or RDS, whatever you're using. I'm going to do Aurora, and then you click next, and then you just fill in this information as it sits, and next, and that's you. I'm going to leave this here because you do have to have a database set up in the background for it to work. I do have one, but setting up databases is beyond the scope of this course. There are other videos on this channel that take you through that process and adding it to the Glue Data Catalog. So feel free to go look at those other videos and pick it up from there, where I cover this a lot more in depth. But that's all you need to know for now, is that essentially you add a connection object to the Glue Data Catalog like this, and then you reference that object in the code rather than specifying like the username and password and connection string every time you need to reach out to that data source. Okay, so next we're going to take a look at AWS Glue jobs, and this is the crux of the ETL work. So a Glue job is composed of a transformation script, which we're going to take a look at in a second, the data sources, which we've already added, data targets, and we'll take a look at that in a little second. Job runs are initiated by triggers that can be scheduled or triggered by events, or indeed that event can be us manually running the script that we're going to do. So the first thing we're going to do is jump onto the console and take a look at the script and how AWS actually automates some of the creation of the scripts and the different parts we need for these Glue jobs. So back on the AWS console in Glue, and this time we want to go ETL and we want to go jobs. And once on jobs, we want to click add job. And we're going to call this customer CSV to Parquet. And I'm just going to put another little underscore there. I am role is the Glue role that we have been using. So this is us starting to set up the job under job properties. So job properties, leave everything else as default in the section type and the Glue version. Path to where it's stored. So we actually set up this path previously. If we go down and we go into our S3 bucket and we go to scripts, so we're just going to store it in scripts and we want to add that. And then the temporary directory is the temp directory that we also set up. So Glue full course data or temporary directory and add. Then leave everything else as default and click next. Our data source is our data source and we click next. And then we want to do a change schema. So we click next. And we want to create the tables in our target data. Our store will be S3. Our format will be Parquet. Our connection, we don't have one. And we need to actually then put in a target for a bucket. So back in, and this time we're going to do full course data inside customer database and click select. Now, we're actually going to add more here because we want a new table. So back into the S3 bucket, back into data, back in the customer database, and we want to create a folder right here. And we're going to call this folder customer underscore Parquet because it's going to be the name of our table, and we want to create that folder. Back into the console, back into the target path, back into the Glue full course, back into data, back into the database, and then choose customer Parquet. Then click next, and as you can see, it has mapped the schema from one source to our other target source. That's perfect, and we want to save job and edit script. So as you can see, Glue quite handily creates the script for us. We don't have to do anything in this case, and what the script is doing is taking our CSV data and changing it to Parquet. There's nothing particularly complex, but just a couple of things I'll point out here on screen so you know what's going on. Glue uses a dynamic frame to lift data from the catalog. So you can see here it's lifting from where the database is called customer database and the table is our CSV. And you'll see here that actually it's writing down using a dynamic data frame here, and it's writing to that S3 location that we specified. There you go, in Parquet format. Oops, too far there for us. In Parquet format. Right there. So we follow this code through. It lifts the data from the data catalog that we specified from that S3 location. It changes the names of the columns. It actually keeps them the same, but that's what this is doing. It's mapping. It's that screen before where it mapped. Here, it's just putting it into resolved apply, and then it's dropping any fields which are null, and then at the end, it writes down to that S3 location that we specified. Brilliant. You want to save, and then you want to run the job. Click run job, and then click at the X at the top right, and you can go onto this jobs page, highlight the jobs, and you will see that it is starting up. It's starting to run. This will take a couple of minutes. It'll cost a few cents. What I'm going to do is pause the video here, and then we can pick it up once it's done. Okay, as you can see, that job has succeeded right here. It took in total 49 seconds to run, and it's put the job output into that S3 bucket that we created. So we can actually go view that data. So if we go to S3, and we go to our bucket we've been using this entire time, called Glue full course, we go into data, go into the database, and we go to Parquet. You can see that it actually created a Parquet file that has our data. And you may say, hey, well, I want to see that data again in Athena. How do we do this? Well, that's simple. We go back onto the Glue console. We're going to go databases, customer database, tables and customer database, add tables using a crawler. And we'll call this one customer underscore Parquet. We'll go next, data stores, crawl all folders, S3, leave that as default. Path we want is if we go back out onto this folder, up one to the customer database, and it's the customer Parquet folder is the one we're after. Copy the URI when you have the actual folder ticked. Make sure you're on the Parquet one. Paste it, go next, add another data store. No, IAM role is an existing role, and it's that full service role that we've been using the entire time that we must delete. Schedule, on demand, output database, customer database, don't prefix anything, hit next, hit finish. Highlight, run crawler. This should take a couple of minutes and we'll find our table. I'm going to pause it here and then pick it up once that crawler has ran. Okay, that took apparently 48 seconds and, oh no, sorry, mark. Okay, so apparently that took 3 minutes and it's now successfully added to the customer database. So if I click customer database, Parquet, you can see that we actually picked up the entire file. Again, like we did in the original video, this is actually available in Athena to be searched. So click on Athena, go to query editor, AWS Glue Data Catalog, yep, customer database, and this time it's the Parquet table we want to see. So if you just right hand click and generate preview table there, we'll actually end up with the rows as you can see in the table. So our job has ran successfully. We've transformed that data, and then I've created a new crawler, placed it over the top of the Parquet data, and then using Athena, we can actually query that data as you can see. That's how simple it is to use AWS Glue to change data from CSV into Parquet. Okay, so the next thing we are going to take a look at is AWS Glue Triggers. A Glue trigger initiates an ETL job. Triggers can be defined based on a scheduled time or an event. So simply put, triggers are a way that we can run ETL jobs by Glue without having to manually click the button Run. Back on the console, if we go to triggers on the left-hand side, we'll take a look at a scheduled trigger first. So we go Add Trigger. You give the trigger a name. So I'm going to call this one Scheduled. Daily, 8 p.m. And you guessed it, we're going to run it on a schedule. It's going to be daily, so it'll run every day at 8 p.m. So let's just go to 8 p.m. And you can have a look here. You can run it hourly, daily. You choose the days, weekly, monthly, or even a custom job. And a custom job, you have full ability to make it run at whatever time and whatever frequency you want using a cron job syntax. So let's just keep this daily. We're going to run at 8. We're going to hit next. And then I ask you, what jobs do you want to run at 8 p.m. every day? And I say the only job we have. And then we go next, review steps, and that's it done. This job will now run every day at 8 p.m. The only thing you need to do is enable it. So if you right hand click and then click activate trigger, enable, and that's it activated. And if you want to deactivate the trigger or deactivate the job, then click it and then you'll have deactivate and it will no longer run every day at 8. So you can basically pause and activate the actual triggers themselves once you have created them. Now, the next type of trigger we want to look at is an event trigger, and that's where an event happens and then your job is kicked off. But to do that, we need to create another Glue job. So back into jobs down here on the left-hand side, add job. Then we want to call this one just customer job 2. Keep it simple. Find that Glue role that we need to delete at the end. Keep it at the Spark job. Change this to the script locations as we had for the other job. So I am Glue full course scripts and in that one. And then I'm just going to be lazy. Copy and paste this here. Doesn't get it. Okay. Then you want to come down here and find that temporary directory that we're looking for. So again, it's in that bucket from earlier, temp-directory. Leave everything else as default. We'll do the same data again. Same thing again, change schema. We're going to create a table in our target, Amazon S3, Parquet data. Go find the same location that we used for the first job. We're not actually going to run this job. It's just for the purpose of looking at the trigger data, database, and then Parquet. Add, next. 1-to-1 column mapping. So all the columns are 1-to-1 again. Nothing special, exactly the same as last time. And then we just want to save the script and exit. We don't need to run it this time. So we have a second job. Back into triggers, and a bit of a bug of the console I found, if you don't refresh the trigger page, it won't pick up the new job that we need. So just a quick refresh. Add triggers, and we're going to call this one a event trigger. So we'll just go event trigger, keep it simple. Job events this time on succeed. So when the customer CSV to Parquet succeeds job, or the job succeeds, so that's the first job. When our first job that we created succeeds, we're now going to ask it to do something. And that something, when I hit next, is run the second job. So when the first job succeeds, kick off an event and run the second job. Leave everything else as default. Let's click this box this time so it's automatically enabled and click finish. And as you can see, what it's saying is trigger parameters. When customer CSV to Parquet finishes, run customer job. That's as simple as that for triggers. That's how we get a daily or a scheduled trigger on any sort of time frame we want running, and an event trigger where we can build dependencies. So you can see that the Glue scheduling means is triggers, and it's a very powerful thing indeed. I advise you to go in, play around with the different types of events, different types of triggers, different types of schedules, and get used to the interface itself. Okay guys, so the last thing I want to talk about is AWS Glue Dev Endpoints. A development endpoint is an environment that you can use to develop and test AWS Glue scripts. It's essentially an abstract cluster. And what it allows us to do is test scripts from local machines or terminals without having to create the jobs that we've been doing this entire time. So it's a way that you can type code locally, send it up the Glue, and then get a response back. Word of warning, it is very expensive in terms of an individual. You're looking at $50 a day. I think we're running one in my work environment right now, and we're paying about $1,000 a month for it. So if it's a personal thing, it's quite expensive if you don't turn it on and off. But in terms of companies, if you have 10 or 12 developers using the endpoint, the amount of time they save is worth it. Now, on the Glue console itself, if we just jump back on, they're located down here. And you can add an endpoint by this button. I do have a video on the channel that covers this in depth, far more than you need to know for an AWS exam. All you need to know for an AWS exam is really that they exist. So I've put the link on the screen now if you want to actually go set up your own dev endpoint, and I include PyCharm Professional in this. So if you were using it in a work environment, this is one way you could interact with it within your company. So go watch that video if you want to check it out now. Well, guys, that's the end of the course. I hope you really enjoyed this AWS session where we went from 0 to hero in AWS Glue in under an hour. We've looked at the Glue Data Catalog, we've looked at ETL jobs, we've looked at triggers, and we've even looked at dev endpoints themselves. The next steps I would advise you is to go back, look over the course material, play around by yourself in AWS, and then look at other resources on YouTube. I have more videos on my channel alone that cover AWS Glue in depth, so you can start there or branch out to other learning resources as you feel free. Please like and subscribe to the channel because it really helps me out keep producing these resources for free. I've also put a link to my website in the description where there's plenty more learning material as well. And until next time, guys, thanks for watching.